Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. With me on this episode of Writers at Work is Robbie Arnott, whose latest novel is DUSK, the hypnotic tale of adult twins Iris and Floyd, who are in pursuit of a deadly puma across the Tasmanian wilderness. That desperate pursuit is also an attempt to escape from the reputation of their outlaw parents and perhaps find a place where they can belong. DUSK is Robbie's fourth novel. His previous works have been acknowledged by nominations for many literary awards in Australia and beyond, including the Dylan Thomas Prize for Young Writers. His earlier novels, Flames, The RAIN HERON, and LIMBERLOST, are all available in the States. Last week it was announced that Robbie was the winner of the ARA Historical Novel Prize, one of the richest literary awards in Australia, for DUSK. Of that novel, The Economist said, "This is a propulsive novel of survival and betrayal, enriched by arresting depictions of nature." The Guardian added, "Arnott has an astonishing facility with language, and his prose imbues the Tasmanian wilderness with an extraordinary beauty." I fully agree with those assessments, and I say, Robbie Arnott, welcome to Writers at Work.
Thank you, Jim. It's lovely to be here.
Robbie, in chatting with writers and readers about DUSK, I get the sense that many Americans don't know much about Tasmania. Do you find that to be true?
Definitely. I find anyone outside of Australia doesn't know much about Tasmania, which is strange, but also lovely in a way.
Is that an advantage for you or a disadvantage? I mean, by now you have an international audience.
I think I've never thought of it either way. I suppose it's an advantage. Within the Australian context, Tasmania has long had a reputation of being, I guess, something akin to maybe Alabama in the States. But overseas, it's seen as much more exotic and interesting, and people seem aware of the natural beauties of the island. So it has a very different reputation or understanding elsewhere, which is, quite lovely, really.
Yeah. So you were born in Launceston and now live in Hobart, both cosmopolitan centers with thriving arts and cultural scenes. Is that correct? Are they vibrant art and cultural scenes in those towns?
I mean, there are. That's probably the most generous way you could describe these two small cities. I'm from the north, and my wife is from the south, and we live in Hobart in the south now. It's very Montague and Capulet down here. So
Well, on online, I mean, again, I actually said to somebody today, I want to go to Hobart, and they said, what is Hobart? But I mean, it seems to me the city wants to develop. I mean, it's a cosmopolitan world capital, or is that as overstating it?
I don't know if I'd call it a cosmopolitan world capital, but there are certain elements to it that make it very striking and interesting. It's the gateway to Antarctica, where all the Antarctic icebreakers dock. It sits at the foot of a very beautiful mountain. It's in a river valley, very close to, world UNESCO protected beaches and forests and rainforests. And we have our own Bond villain in a way.
Uh-huh.
There's this like maverick genius, extremely wealthy man who's built this kind of world famous contemporary museum, and he's hacked it into the side of a cliff, and you go down these elevators to his subterranean lair. It's called Mona, and people come from all around the world to see it. So there's not many other places like it.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry to keep going back to the same point. Well, I'm fairly certain I've never spoken to anyone from Tasmania before, but more to it, I'm interested in your perspective as an author. For example, in the early stages of your development as a writer, um, did you view the country from a perspective of a city dweller?
I guess maybe a large town dweller.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never really thought of myself as a city person, purely because, I grew up in Launceston, which is it's about 70 or 80,000 people. But I would spend half my time on the coast where my grandmother's from. in orchard country and places where we do a lot of snorkeling and hiking or bushwalking, as we call it here. And yeah, I would never have thought of myself as a cosmopolitan city person. I'm not good in crowds.
Okay. So um, the you're writing about the environment and the wilderness. Um, it's natural for you,
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely what I'm drawn towards as a person, and I'm drawn towards it in my writing too. And I kind of learned to lean into the things that interest me or that I'm fascinated by or that I don't understand but feel compelled to investigate. I think the writing comes out better when I follow that rather than, trying to write something that I think would sell well or that people want me to write. I think it's better
right?
to focus on your interests.
And you can do it from the inside because you know it. You're not observing from the outside.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even where I live in Hobart, I can walk out my front door and without getting in any vehicles, be on the top of the mountain in maybe 90 minutes. And you go through about 7 different layers of forest to get there. So, yeah, I feel like I'm pretty close to it all anyway.
Great. Yeah. I want to talk about the book specifically.
Yeah.
Your debut novel, Flames. It's called magical realism. I mean, you have a fire spirit who takes the form of a man and a water rat who's a god, but you also have a private investigator in there. Um, and you alternate points of view from chapter to chapter. Robbie, this is a lot to take on in a debut novel. And,
Yeah.
how did you come to develop that story and to tell it in that way?
Look, I was pretty surprised it got published, to be honest. I'd been living in Melbourne, working in advertising and wanting to be a writer, but writing things that didn't come naturally to me. I was, doing, as a lot of, young men do, writing terrible knockoffs of Raymond Carver stories, essentially, and doing a bad job of it. And then I moved back home to Tasmania, and I just thought, I'm going to write something I would want to read that feels like something only I could write. And I didn't know what that would be. So I essentially wrote every chapter in a different genre and from the perspective of a different character, and then stitched it all together into one story that became a novel. And I wasn't really sure if it would work or not, but the idea excited me. And I thought if I can pull this off, then it might not be a great book, but at least it'll be unique and interesting. And I was pretty inspired by, at the time, A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan, which used that sort of polyphonic and genre blending and format shifting sort of style. And I wondered if I could do a very nature-based Tasmanian version of that, that focused on trees rather than music. And it kind of fell together.
Yeah. Did you have an agent at that time?
No, I didn't get an agent until my fourth novel.
Oh my. Is that typical of what you can do in Tasmania, or is that just the way you like to do business?
Um, I got a publisher in on the mainland of Australia, and
I
then I
see.
just did 3 books with them and got international publishers through that. And it wasn't until I moved publishers that uh, Richard Flanagan told me I needed to get serious, and he sent me out with an agent in London. So I'm not very good at the business side of things.
No, I was just curious to see
Yeah.
when you did. I mean, first of all, in my mind, whenever I hear or I say I'm going to write a novel only I can write, people say, "Oh God," because a lot of times
That's true. Yeah.
they want you to write a novel that somebody else has already written and they know can sell. But but props to you for going your own way. I want to jump ahead to Dusk, and in the introduction, I made it quite clear. I love the book. In Flames, the primary characters are a brother and sister who have a terrible misunderstanding. And in Dusk, we have Iris and Floyd, siblings who are very close and committed to each other. What is the appeal to you as a writer of the sister-brother relationship?
I really wanted to write about the intensity of a relationship. But with this novel, I wasn't interested in it being romantic. And I also wanted to write about something more than friendship. So the the textures of a sibling relationship really appealed to me. And the other thing that I was really drawn towards was I wanted to write about kind of a two-hander with 2 main characters, but you you cleave closely most to one, which is Iris. I
Right.
mean, for most of the novel. Um, and I wanted to write about them when we know they're not going to come together or bust apart. You know, so many stories focus on relationships at the moment where they begin or at the times when they're about to explode. And I wanted to start the novel with that question having already been answered. So there's these 37-year-old siblings who drive each other crazy but are never going to leave each other. And I wanted them to pick them up at that point. And then doing that allows for all sorts of other tensions to form the basis of the plot. And that really appealed to me. I thought it'd be really interesting if we didn't have to answer the more obvious question, then more interesting ones could arise.
Yeah, their love is profound. I mean, they are linked, and one could imagine that probably around age 4 they realized that having each other was it. Um, and and um, I just found it a unique relationship in what I've been reading lately because they do tend to each other. And in Iris' case, she has to tend to Floyd physically because he has a debilitating injury, and she's very dutiful about it. And so there's different aspects to the relationship I found that brought me very close to the two of them.
Oh, I'm really glad, Jim. I guess that's what I
Yeah,
was aiming for.
yeah,
Yeah, Iris is in many ways Floyd's carer, is the language we probably use in the 21st century.
yeah,
But in other ways, she's completely dependent upon him. And it's a relationship where they're able to both appreciate it without ever having to vocalize it. And yeah, I really enjoyed kind of getting to know them and how
yeah.
they treat each other.
I'm very sensitive about giving too much away. So at any time, if you feel I've gone too far, you tell me to stop. Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, okay. Iris and Floyd are hunting a puma. In fact, the titular puma, Dusk, that is killing and has killed people. And they're doing so to collect a bounty. Now, determination aside, they have very few qualifications for this. Um, and more qualified hunters have already failed. However, they know what it's like to be hunted and they know how to survive in the wilderness. Can you talk a bit about their backgrounds, please?
Yeah, essentially, Iris and Floyd are the children of former convicts. I don't know how well Americans know about the convict story in Australia, but it was essentially a mild form of slavery that occurred at the foundation of Australia, particularly in Tasmania, where um, unwanted criminals and undesirables in the United Kingdom were shipped over in chains to Australia to serve out prison sentences, but in indentured servitude until they earned their freedom. And unsurprisingly, a lot of these people rebelled against that and escaped and became outlaw criminals, and which were known at the time as bushrangers. And Iris and Floyd's parents were these bushrangers, robbing and killing and thieving to survive in the Australian bush, in the Tasmanian bush. And in the Australian context, the story of a bushranger is very similar to America to the cowboy. It's this kind of romantic figure that forms a huge part of the cultural landscape and history of the nation. And there's many, many stories about them, the most famous being Ned Kelly, who people probably might have
Right.
heard of.
Yes.
And I wanted to write a novel where instead of telling a bushranger story, we focused on the people who come from the repercussions of these bushrangers. So Floyd and Iris grew up with their parents and were on the run, essentially living hard scrabble, participating in their parents' crimes. And then once they're free of their parents, what do they do next? The society knows them for who they are and has judged them that way. So they're completely unacceptable to people, yet they're innocent of their parents' crimes. And I thought that was a much more interesting story than just telling another bushranger tale.
Yeah. Without going into detail, a man tells Iris and her brother that he's going to kill them. And when they ask why, he says, because I should. Dusk is killing innocent people, and you and your brother are nothing like innocent. Um, and we understand that sentiment because you have made the characters very vivid. The twins' parents very vivid, even though they're on the periphery. They feel very alive in the story. And but the brother and sister view them quite differently, don't they?
Yeah, I mean,
Iris
Iris is
has
very,
yeah, Iris has tender feelings about her parents, right?
yeah, in many ways, she's forgiven them, or if not forgiven them, chosen to understand them for all that they are rather than, you know, just their crimes. And she knows that her parents were poor people growing up in the United Kingdom who were starving and stole some food in order to live. And then they were completely unjustly clamped in chains and shipped to the other side of the world away from their family and expected to somehow survive. And of course, they couldn't any other way than to be transformed horribly by this experience. And they went on to do terrible things as a result of the terrible things that were done to them. I think this is a fairly familiar human story. And Iris, as an adult, chooses to understand that. I think Floyd's a bit less forgiving, but I think it's one of the great strengths of Iris as a person that she can understand the totality of something, but still decide what she values rather than to be hyper judgmental or anything like that.
Yeah. You know, in your novel, The Rain Heron, a middle-aged woman withdraws from society and lives on a mountain in an almost um, animal-like existence. But in reading Dusk, I often had the impression that the twins, while suspicious of people who may prejudge them, aren't really antisocial. Iris, in particular, she craves contact.
Yeah, they're not outcast by choice. When they go decide to take up the bounty for Dusk, largely out of desperation, because as you said, they're not qualified. I mean, they don't even have a rifle. Um, in many ways, what they're really looking for is a sense of belonging as well. And when they travel up into the highlands where they haven't been before, Iris has these moments of meeting people and also interacting with the landscape. And for the first time, thinking that she might be able to stay somewhere. And this, of course, becomes as much a part of the problem for her as the problem of finding or not finding Dusk.
Yeah, and the story is set in a landscape. The overall impression of which, for me, was just vastness and boundlessness. So it's very surprising whenever Iris and Floyd meet another person or come upon a group of people. Um, Regarding the environment, I read an interview with you where you said it's incredibly beautiful, but stark and savage and hostile. There's this emptiness in all this beauty. Um, so when you're out and about and you're exploring nature, um, do you think to yourself, this would be a really wonderful setting, or this would be a daunting setting, or I don't know if I could take this on, or I can't wait to take this on? I mean, purely as a writer, what is your reaction to that vastness?
I think I go spend a bit of time in it and do some hiking and bushwalking. And eventually a feeling settles on you that, oh, I'm going to write about this. And then I kind of let it sit for a while and wait until I figure out how to do it. And I guess the only thing I do is not try to force it. Um, so in sense of the vastness, it's kind of trying to figure out how to write about it in a relation to people who do or do not belong there. And I wrestled with it for a couple of years till I figured out how to do it because I didn't know how to do it until I realized that, the emptiness of this vast and beautiful landscape could be mirrored by the emptiness inside Floyd and Iris, particularly Iris, because she has no connection to her community and she desperately wants to. And once I
Yeah.
could twin those emptinesses, it kind of came together.
Very early on in the book, though, there's a lovely scene. I'm going to read it if I hope I don't, you don't mind, but it says,
Of course.
okay, Iris had heard this country described as harsh, desolate, and while in all the sharp rock and wide skies, she could see where those words might come from. She found no truth in them. Instead of harshness or bleakness, she felt a freeing, emptying openness that bounced off the hard stone. And Describing a body of water, she says, the sight of one made her pause. Each new body of water was a strange delight. She felt she could walk into them despite the bite in the air, despite the snow gathering at their edges, and be received by the water with an impossibly mineral warmth. So there you are. You've set up this environment, and you will exploit this environment for the next couple hundred pages. And yet, your lead character disagrees with you.
Yeah, yeah, she does. That's all part of the fun of it, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It'd be terribly boring if novelists just wrote about protagonists who were just like them and agreed with them all the time.
Right, right. But what I found amusing about it was that you set it up so early that um, and after a while, of course, I forgot about it because I was just completely swept up in the story. But I would say for the first 50 pages or so, I was waiting for you to prove Iris correct, and you really don't.
Yeah, I mean, I have a great affection for her as a character, but I didn't think it would be very interesting if I made it easy for her.
Right.
And often our instincts towards the landscape, the natural world in general, um, we kind of anthropomorphize them, and that's what she does a little bit. She brings a lot of her own emotion into what is an uncaring landscape, and it can be uncaring, but it can also be gorgeous. And I always want to keep these two things in mind when I'm writing about the natural world,
Yeah.
and so that she's wrong in a wonderful way. I hope.
Yes. So there's another key character I'd like to talk about, and that is the puma, Dusk. Uh, First, we must establish that it is quite real and a killer and a one. I suspect you have a certain sympathy for Dusk, don't you?
Yeah, I really do. Dusk's much like Iris and Floyd's parents. She's been transported across the world through no fault of her own and expected to survive. But, unlike Iris and Floyd's parents, Dusk and the other pumas who are now gone really flourishes. She's taken to a landscape where she's been brought there to hunt deer, but finds it much easier to pick off sheep, and she does quite well. And when shepherds come after her, she picks them off too. I've had a few I've done quite a few interviews where people have said, she's savage and she's vengeful. And I don't think she's either of those things. She's just an animal who's doing a better job at surviving than all the people up there.
Yeah. Are we giving too much away by mentioning how pumas came to Tasmania?
Well, not at all, because I made that up entirely for the
Is
novel.
that true?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
very good. It's excellent.
Um, Thank you. Yeah, it's not true, but it made a certain sense to me. I'm really fascinated by different aspects of colonial history, like not just the horrors and the savagery, but the strangeness. So much strangeness occurred when, especially Britain, was pillaging the world and dragging different species all around the planet in order so a certain duke could hunt the same thing he hunted at home. And it made sense to me that they might have brought pumas to Tasmania as well.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it. I won't say it though because it is such a delight. And in that delight, you're telling us something about man's contribution to his own demise when he tries to force the hand of nature, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's countless examples of it all around the world of something that seemed like a good idea at the time was actually just very selfish and destructive.
Yeah. There's something that perplexed me that I must ask you about. Late in the book, something terrible happens, and we, the readers, are greeted with 2.5 pages of nothingness but black sheets, as if part of the narrative has been redacted. A few pages later, you do it again. Why did you do that?
I did that really deliberately, and had to kind of fight with some of my publishers to have it in there. It does give it a little bit away, but for the vast majority of the book, everything preceding this section and after it, we stick very close third person to Iris. And Floyd is always there, but we're always observing him and not really hearing from him. We kind of see him filtered through Iris's experiences. And then for that short couple of pages, we're away from Iris and we're right close to Floyd. And we just get it's just a small section where suddenly we're in his shoes, which it's not a first person point of view, but we're right there alongside him. And I wanted there to be almost a dramatic moment where we're ripped away from Iris and next to him. And I thought simply having a chapter break wasn't enough for me. I guess it's a flair for drama, maybe, the kind that drives my wife crazy. But I wanted people to get to this particularly climactic moment in the novel and then turn over and see a black page and to think what's happening, to be as confounded by this blackness as they were by what's just occurred in the story. And then once they get past that black page, which almost is forcing them to stop reading for a moment, suddenly we're close to Floyd and not Iris. It was almost done as quite a physical piece of formatting, really. And I had not seen it done in many books before, and I just wondered if I could do it. And like we were discussing earlier with my first book, I just thought, I wonder if I can pull it off, and then I'll, someone will stop me if I can't, and I got away with it.
And how is it received by readers?
Oh, the black pages or
Yeah,
the novel?
yeah, the black pages.
Most people have really liked it. Some people have taken their copy back to the bookstore saying there's been a printing error. But I think most readers have just gone with it. They kind of get it. When they first see it, they find it confusing. And then once they get through it, they understand it. And so a couple of people, have thought it was a printing error. But, you have to, I think there's a bit of a relationship of trust between a writer and a reader. And most of them seem to have gone along with me, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, again, without giving too much away, I would say that it's not a gimmick. That what follows justifies the decision.
Yeah, I hope so. I definitely never thought of it as gimmick. I thought of it as quite important. And yeah, I feel lucky
Yeah.
I've got away with it.
So what's next for you, Robbie?
Oh, I'm writing a historical novel set here again in Tasmania. There was this, in the 19th century, there was this Italian silk merchant who came here, and he found an island, and he was going to turn it into this grand multicultural utopia. He had all these, his name was Diego Benacchi. This is a real story. And he brought all these different people from all over the world. He planted silk farms and vineyards. He was this kind of master showman and salesman and visionary leader. And he nearly made it work. But then in the 1890s, there was a great stock crash in London, and he lost all his money and everything fell apart. And I'm trying to write a novel where things didn't fall apart for him, where this kind of grand and wild dream of his actually came true. And yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Sounds great. With me on this episode of Writers at Work is Robbie Arnott, whose latest novel is Dusk, the tale of adult twins Iris and Floyd, who are in pursuit of a deadly puma across the Tasmanian wilderness. As you can tell, I loved it. Robbie, thank you for joining us on Writers at Work.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's been my pleasure.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersaTworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Until next time, happy reading.